and welcome to this first Keystroke Live of 2014, January 8th. We did move the program from Thursday at 9 a.m. to Wednesday at 10 a.m., so thank you, Gordon, Ken, and Robert, for recognizing the change there. We appreciate that. We will be doing this every Wednesday at 10 a.m. We are kind of going through a series on editing. We're going to talk about editing labels for a couple of weeks, and then reports, and then we'll move into database screens and other toolbars and things like that. So we're kind of getting into some nitty-gritty dealer details, and it's asking me to stop sharing my webcam, but I will keep it on here for now. So we're going to talk about some of this editing. When we started talking about doing labels, it's like, oh, we'll do a week on labels, a week on reports, a week on toolbars, and kind of said, oh, we could do 6 weeks on labels when you really start looking at it. So it may change a little bit. There will be one change to the schedule I sent out yesterday, that we are doing a Merchant Warehouse Genius training session on January 29th, the last Wednesday of this month. I also wanted to note to everyone, hopefully you have seen I guess it looks better than me, the Business Solutions Best Channel Vendors. This is the January issue of Business Solutions magazine. And here on page 20, oh, which hand is it? This one. Here on page 20, we have the Specialized Business Solutions scoring high again. We sent out a little email about it, so you'll see that. But thank you, because that is rated by resellers, that they collect information from resellers. So it is you that awarded us this, and we appreciate it. I think they've been doing it since 2009, and we've won it every year. So it's been a good thing for us, and a good way to get the word out about Keystroke. I am going to talk about labels. I kind of mentioned we're breaking this up. There really are two types of labels. There are those generated by Keystroke, where we generate the barcode, we generate the text, we send it to a printer, and then ones that we have for specialty printers like Zebra, Godex. There's also Eltron. And basically what those do, those almost create like a little basic program that you send to the printer, and then that creates the label. So they're very different in how they set up. When for the Keystroke labels, you're actually kind of drawing the picture and laying it out. The specialty printers, you're saying, here's the font I want to use. Here are the X and Y coordinates on where I want it to print on the label. Here's the text. I want it reverse. I want it bold. I want it bigger. I want it smaller. That's all done by these little programs. And so how they look is quite different depending on if it's Keystroke sending it to, say, a laser printer or inkjet printer, or if you're using one of those specialty label printers. Why are those specialty label printers good? Well, one, if you're printing a high volume, they print a lot fast. You can print to special label stock, whether you want Tyvek or plastic. The Tyvek and plastic, you have to do thermal transfer, which is basically one of those old-fashioned fax ribbons that get melted on to the media. And so the Tyvek is very tough. It's hard to rip or take off. They use them in jewelry shops, at garden centers or green stores. They like the plastic because that withstands weather when you're actually melting the ink into the plastic. They also, typically, the Eltron printers, like the 28, I don't know what they're on now, 2828 or 2824, those are thermal transfer. It heats up the label stock, and that's what causes the text to appear. I like for printing, and so that's the specialty printers, but when Keystroke's generating, I think using a laser printer is best, just because, mostly because the margins are a lot easier to use. A lot of the inkjet printers have smarts and printer drivers, and sometimes they have a very funny top margin and left-hand margin, like that's 20th of an inch, whereas laser printers, you typically get that half-inch top margin, quarter-inch margin on the sides, and so it's a lot easier to hit the labels if you're doing that. It's also a very valid application for dot matrix printers. They do have them, and they are workhorses, and you can put in some pin feed label stock and print a lot of labels out of dot matrix printers as well. You can use the tags created as price tags or shelf tags, and you can use text identifier or barcode. What's the difference? Well, if you're having lots of bike stores is always an example. They got lots of little parts. It's hard to put a sticker on there with a barcode that you can scan. So you can use the stock number, which is the simplest identifier for each item, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is almost just as easy to type in as it is to find the barcode and scan it, especially if you got small items or printing things. Do you encode the stock number, the product code? There's a lot of different choices there. One is you don't want to have too big or too long of a barcode, because that gets difficult to scan. Are you using numbers and letters or just numbers? So there's a lot of things you can look at as you do that, and Keystroke is designed to be pretty flexible. One note I want to make on barcodes is on typically most items, and here is a bottle of water that's got and I know that doesn't really focus that closely, it's got a UPC-A code there that's 12 characters long. It's a initial digit that's typically a 0. That's the type of UPC-A code it is. I think 2 spot weight, 3 is drugs, 5 and 9 are coupons. Then there's a 5-digit manufacturer identifier, so everything from Microsoft, and this is Arrowhead, so everything from Arrowhead is going to be 71142. Then there's a 5-digit product code. This bottle of water happens to be 00050, so they're just probably incrementing it. And then there's a check digit at the end. This one has a check digit of 0. What's that check digit? Well, I think you add up all the odd digits, you multiply by 3, you add up all the even digits, you add those numbers together, you take the mode of that, which is the ones digit, you subtract that from 10, and that's your check digit. So it's kind of a complicated process of doing. Why I talk about all this is typically you're not going to print a UPC-A code out of Keystroke, because you have that check digit in there, and you'd have to have the check digit on your, when you scan it, you'd have to either truncate that check digit or have it in your product code, and so it gets difficult to generate. So we use different symbologies for those barcodes. We'll talk a little bit about that, but let me get into Keystroke. And here we have the Keystroke Label Manager. I think I'm using the Martha appearance theme here. And I'm just going to go into price and by item. Now with the report settings feature, I can set up a variety of different settings. So if I have 5 different labels I want to do, I can have presets for each one of those. It's just a handy feature to remember how to use. And here I'm printing individual barcodes for our example here. I'm actually going to be printing them to the screen because that makes it easier for them to see. You can basically choose how you want the list sorted, what price you want printed on that item, whether it's the current price. If you have a price table effective just for this day, it would include what's on that price table. You can do the base price, variety of information. You can specify if you want to print them based on a price table like on sale, and that's going to be next week, then I can print those price tags ahead of time. I'm not going to do that because I might get confused. And you can prompt for quantity if you want to, or just use the quantity that's there. You would change that to 1 if you were just doing shelf tags. Box tags is, I'm printing them, I break it down 24 to a box. Do I want 24 labels or one label? And then there is the form. And I'm just going to start with the basic, the one wide. Here's just kind of my test form. Is that the one I was using? Here's my test form. And something here, I'm printing to the screen. When I do that, if I say print to printer, and I'm just going to change this to the Windows printer, it's using this printer driver to generate what goes to the screen. So if I select Windows, and I'm going to just do my standard form here, and I'll print 6 of the writing tablets. Oh, did I forgot to change it back to screen? So I'm going to do 6 of these writing tablets. Here I'm getting it's just a 1 across, so this is like a 1 3/4 by 1 inch label. I've got the stock number, the description, the product code, and a price. So it's pulling up that price. I could use this for a tractor feed. I could use this for a laser printer, but typically with the laser printer, I'm getting the good margin at the top. Everything is working pretty well. You have to watch out when you change from printer to printer how it handles margins. If it's using the margin of this document we generated, or adding this margin at the top to the margin of the printer, it takes a little bit of play. Using this label editor is a bit of an art form. So now if I go to that, and I'm going to change it to my special printer driver for labels I had set up, that's going to give me a little bit bigger price. And when I print those 6 labels, oh, I forgot to change it back. And if you see what I'm doing here, so that actually went to the printer. I'm changing it back to the screen, but it's going to use my label printer rather than my Windows printer that has a little bit different printer driver. And so now you'll see I was using like a double height font form for the price. So if I'm looking at this, I say, hey, that's great, except I want that $sign looks goofy. I want that to be like the $1.54. I'm going to go back in here and edit my label form. Just highlight it on the list, hit F3, and it pulls up my edit label form. So here there is the file name. You'll see on the list here, any of these file names that start with an underscore, those are our default files. They get installed every time you install Keystroke, so you don't want to edit those because they'll get overwritten when you update Keystroke. So you just have to give it a different name. I gave it a real tricky name like David. You have a description and a title if you want it. Then there's the number of lines and width, and basically this is using, unless you've messed with things quite a bit, 6 lines per inch, and then 80 characters per inch across the page. So 6 lines per inch vertically, 10 characters per inch horizontally. How many are you printing across? It's saying it's basically going to take this label and do it 1 across the page. It's very easy to change that to 3, and then we'll get 3 across the page rather than 1. I don't want a header. I don't want page breaks for labels. Typically, I can mess with the margin. You know, 1 character would be or 1 line would be a 1/6 of an inch, so 3 lines would be 1/2 an inch if you needed to do that. And here, my price, I have selected these print codes. Just going to hit enter. Go to my print codes. I just hit insert here to pull up my list. I've got bold on and off, and then I've also got code 10 on and off. That's something I've set up in my printer driver. So I can go to my $sign, come here, I'm going to hit insert, print codes, hit insert, and I'm going to do bold on and off and code 10 on and off, and just hit F10 to save that. F10 again, 10 again. Now when I select this form and print it to the screen for my writing tablet. Okay, so what have I done here? Well, something's not quite right. I maybe don't have on and off right. Doing it 3 across, I maybe didn't space out my labels. If I do it 1 across, it'll look right. Or, so now if I come in here, by item and last used. So what did I do wrong there? Okay, well, that 3 across just didn't give me 3 across. Why is that? Well, if I look at line 1, I have 1 space before, and I'm printing the number on 5 characters. That's 6 characters. So when I say 3 across, it's going to do 6 characters, 6 characters, 6 characters. So it's really going to end up taking up 2.5 inches across an 8-inch page. Line 2 is 31 characters. Line 3 is 21 characters. And line 4 is a little funky because it's double size. But what I would want to do here is I can hit insert. I've got 6 characters, and let's say we want them to be 31 characters, so I need about 25 more. So I'm just going to hit insert, line 1, and I'm just going to say this is 0, and the width is 25. So my line 1 adds up to 31. 1 space before, a width of 5, a second field on line 1 that's 25 characters wide. Line 2 is 31 characters already. Line 3 is 21, so I'm going to hit insert. I need to add 10 characters. Just leave it blank. I'll do 0 before and a width of 10 and save that. And so now I'm going to go ahead and save that. Print it to screen. We'll do 6 of these guys again. Okay, so you see how my text is a little, because I've got 31, 31, 31, okay, it maybe doesn't need to be 31, it probably needs to be 30. That'll move the far right-hand column over 2 characters, the center column over 1. You know, maybe it needs to be 29. My $1.54 needs a little spacing there, right? So I can come back to my label, hit F3 to edit it. So after my $1.54, just going to hit insert here, line number 4, and let's give it, how about 20 characters? We'll see what that looks like. Just going to save it. I'll print 6 of these guys again. Okay, so that was maybe a little too much. I probably needed maybe 17 characters, but you get what I'm doing here. So I'll just tune it in one last time so you get kind of a feel for what I'm doing with this editing. And okay, so I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna take 2 characters off of each one. So I'll take 2 characters off of line 1, make this 28, 2 characters off of line 2, and line 3, the width will be 8. Take 2 characters off it. And then I thought I needed about 3. This gets a little, and this is a good observation, because I'm got this font change and font size change, it gets a little harder to line everything up perfectly. So now when I print this label, okay, you see how the, looks like it didn't get my move in the big text, but you see how the 11-inch writing tablet is more moved over. the large text there didn't move a whole lot. I'm not sure what I goofed up there, but you kind of get the way I'm doing this trial and error. If we look at, I have another, if I look at the barcode 3, this is a 3 across barcode tag. And again, if I print it, this is one we have set up. This is actually barcoding the product code. So the 224466, that's what is encoded above that. If I zoom way in, you'll see there's a wide bar and a narrow bar and the wide bar. That's the start and end. And then you can kind of start looking at it and figure out, okay, what represents the 2, what represents the 4, what represents the 6. You can see some repetitive. So it's just a different way of writing that. And if I go back to 100% here, there we go. But you see this one is all lined up. It's all nice. If you used a different font for the $1.54, then it gets more difficult to line things up. Now this barcode symbology we're looking at here is code 128. And that is a very condensed code, but you can use numbers and letters. It's a real standard code. Why don't we use the UPC? Again, that's because you have to have the check digit. It gets more difficult. It's a lot wider to print. What controls what goes on with that barcode, if I come in here, I'm just going to hit F3 to look at it, is, you see this, it's line number 2. I'm taking my product code field out of the inventory, but my alignment is B8321. What does that mean? B means we're going to print a barcode. 8 is the symbology we're using, so 128 is 8. 3 is the actual height of the barcode, so 1 would be 1 line high, 2 would be 2, 3 is half an inch, 6 lines per inch, 3 lines. If you need this information, and if I go to my help here, this is just the keystroke help screen with barcode formats. It tells me code 128 is a code of 8, so it's the letter B and then one of these. I would typically recommend using 8 or code 3 of 9. That's 5. Again, that will represent numbers and letters. Or this interleave 2 of 5, it's code 7. Interleave 2 of 5 is a very, very condensed format and can only represent numbers. Then, if you look at the barcode size information, so we have B8321, 3 is the height. Oh, and it's actually 1/10 of an inch, not 1/6 of an inch. Then there's a barcode width and a barcode ratio. So the width is, barcodes are made up of wide bars and narrow bars, and so that width just makes the wide bar and narrow bar wider. And then the ratio is the ratio of the width of narrow to wide. And so if we look at some of these changes, we go back to keystroke. And so if, let's change it to B7 to get the interleaved, did I have that right? Interleave 2 of 5. Let's switch back to make sure I'm right there. So I can go back to my barcode. And interleave 2 of 5 is 7. So if I go back to keystroke here, and we'll leave the 321, we'll just change one thing at a time. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go ahead and save this, but it won't save. Okay, names that start with a barcode. So we'll call this one Dave. And then we'll call it barcode 3 test, just so we know what it is. Save it, barcode 3 test. If I print 6 of these guys. Okay, so the barcode doesn't look, make sure I have it, doesn't look a whole lot different, but it's slightly different. And with just the numbers, if I had numbers and letters, it would be a little more condensed. So let's try changing something else here. I'm going to hit F3 to edit, hit enter on that line, and let's change it to too high, and we'll do a width of 3. And now when I print it, so you see it's not quite as high, and it's a little bit fatter and wider there. You can adjust this for how things are scanning, or if you want it taller or not quite as tall, just how it does it. You see it didn't move any of the other text because the graphic is being created and it kind of overlays the text. And I'll show you that if I came in here and if I hit F3 to edit, if I change that height to say 5, then it'll be ½ an inch. Change this back to 2. Let's see what happens if we change the ratio to 2. And let's change this to 9. I think that's 3 of 9. So we're changing a few different things. Select it. I'm going to go ahead and print it. Okay, so you see now it's overlaying the other text because we made it ½ an inch tall, so it's too tall and ends up overlaying the actual product code. The way the bars are laid out looks slightly different. It's a little bit wider with that code 3 of 9. So I've got a few things I was showing you here. If I go back to that original test I was doing, I'm going to edit it. I'm going to go back to one across just to make it a little simpler. And remember when I printed 6 of them, there are my 6. I've got my big bold price there. That big bold price is generated using a printer drive, special printer driver I created called Label. And it's using, when you create a printer driver, it creates a file label.prd. Then you can create a file called label.wpd, which is for the Windows printer driver. And what that looks like is, I'm going to bring up my label.wpd for you all to see here. This is telling Keystroke what to do with all of those bold on, bold off. I used code 10 on, code 10 off. What I've done here is, so my code 10 on that I've got highlighted there, I'm changing the font from Courier New, which is a serif font, to Arial, which is a sans serif font, so it doesn't have little tails on the text. And my size, I'm changing from 12 characters per inch, or I'm sorry, 12 point to 24 point. So I'm basically doubling the size of the character. If I change this to say 16, and then I'm going to save this file, close it, I'm sorry, switch back to Keystroke, looking price by item. Now how do I know I'm using that label printer driver? If I say print to printer, there, my printer name is Label. That printer is using this Label printer driver. If I changed it to Windows, it wouldn't print it bold and big because I haven't defined that in the Windows printer driver. I've only defined that in the Label printer driver. I don't want to send it to the printer, so I'm just going to change that to screen. And now when I print my 6 labels, you see I've got a big price, but it's not, it's in between 12 point and 24 point. It's 16. Now, If I changed it to 18 or 14, it may not change the actual size of the font. It's got to fall somewhere in kind of a standard font set. So again, all this label editing and form editing, it's a bit of an art form. Remember, we've got a lot of standard ones. If you want to create a label, it's always good to start with one of our existing ones and make some changes to it. You can also create a label from scratch. It's usually more difficult to do. Just going to hit enter on form and then hit, oh, that's F3 to edit, hit insert to add a new one. And this is, let's call it an INV list. So I can say this is a one-line label with a width of 80, and I can come down here and hit insert and say I'm going to do inventory, product code. We'll make that 15 wide, save it, hit insert, do inventory description, make that 25 wide, hit insert, and do inventory and base price, and make that right justified, save that, and then hit insert, field text, put that in there, make that 30 wide. Now, I should be pretty close there. So now I can save that, and I will run this for all my inventory. And it's basically just a little custom inventory report I created. Uh-oh. Let's go back to cancel print job, okay. Item, last use. I'm going to print one label for each item. That's what I did wrong there. And so if you see there, basically, I created a inventory by description. So I've got product code, description, price, and then a place to type in a comment if I want to. So I just kind of created a little custom inventory, or you could do it for customers as well, report out of the label manager here. So if you want something simple, it's easy to create a label and print it to do it just like you would, rather than editing or creating a whole report form. So with that, and this is where I kind of started, that when we first started talking about this, we're like, oh, there's so much we could talk about. I could talk about this for hours. So I kind of gave you an overview on what barcode symbologies there are, doing multiple across labels, the printer driver and the WPD file. There's lots of good information in the help screens about that as well. We do have like some price labels set up here, like and next week we're going to look at all these Eltron Zebra ones we have here, but like our 1 by 1 8 across, okay, yeah, they look tiny, but you see those are inch by inch labels that you can do. You've got all the different barcodes. Sometimes if you're trying to encode something that it doesn't really like, you'll get like this big black bar there that just isn't quite happy with how it's doing. But this is a 80 per page label, so a lot of different things you can do with that. And I didn't even get into doing customer mailing labels. If you need to, you can do those. Department category, maybe if you're having a sale on a department, you could take it and make a sign, but really use that for customers or vendors to print mailing, print shipping labels, that kind of thing if you need to. So with that, I will finish because I have just about taken up my 45 minutes here. Try to keep it under a half hour. But are there any questions? Can you hear? You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I know somebody was having trouble hearing me there, but hopefully.
Yeah, that was me, Dave. It was just distorted for a while.
Okay, that was maybe my slow connection there, but thank you all for attending, and be sure you can call us here, 800-359-3458, and we can help you out with labels as you're working on them. It's easy to tune them, it's easy to tweak them, so give us a call, and next week we will, and if I go back to my PowerPoint, next week we will hear from Jay about editing. We're going to be specifically to the Zebra Elton labels, which is the TLP Plus programming language, and the Godex labels, which is an inexpensive printer available from Godex that has a pretty easy to use label encoding language. And Jay will give you more information next week. So Happy New Year, and thanks for coming.
Have a good one.